All right, everybody. Today we are not playing Magic, but we're going to talk about Magic. I think it's about time that I finally introduce myself or tell you a little bit about who I am and how I got involved with the what I take to be the best game that's ever been made, Magic: The Gathering, and how within that game I've become especially obsessed with the format Legacy. I figured I would make this video in celebration of us having achieved over 200 subscribers on the channel now, which is more than I thought I would have when I first started out doing this. This is kind of just something that I do on the side because I enjoy playing Magic, and I have also in the past enjoyed, the process of editing content and stuff like that, whether it be music and audio or video stuff. And so, I kind of just decided that I was going to get into doing some more Magic: The Gathering content because I enjoy playing Legacy and I enjoy watching other people play Legacy. And I thought, maybe more people are like me. But who am I, right? Who is this person that you've been watching for the past for the past few months? Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'm going to start by talking about what a semiotician even is. You might wonder what the hell a semiotician is, and so I will briefly explain that to you, but I won't get too into the weeds because it has to do with my work in philosophy. I'm going to talk about where everything began for me with respect to Magic: The Gathering. I'm going to talk about my experiences playing Legacy in particular. I'll go over the few notable finishes that I have and the decks that I played to those finishes, and then I'll conclude by talking a little bit about the road ahead for the channel here. This is me on the right. I guess it'll be right above my face, holding a giant hammer of the first paper 1K tournament that I ever played in. I finished first place with Blue Black Delver. It was a pretty sweet deck back when Grief was still legal. In any case, though, we're jumping ahead of the gun, and it's best to go back to the very beginning. So what the hell is a semiotician? Well, a semiotician is someone who studies semiotics, and semiotics is a word basically that derives from the Greek word here, semion, which is ancient Greek for sign. And so a sign, like there are stop signs. You encounter signs probably on your morning commute, whether it be in the subway or on the street. But like there are also signs in nature, right? So smoke is a sign of fire. A black boil in your armpit is a sign of the bubonic plague. There are also signs in a sweat, right? I'm very anxious. I'm sweating all the time. Sweat is an indication or a sign that there are portals or pores in your skin, right? These are all natural signs, but in some respects, words can also be understood as signs. A word is a sign that stands for some object to the person who interprets the word. So Scott is a sign that stands for me, Scott, or in some respects, Semiotician is a sign that stands for this channel. The image that you see here, and which is my icon on Discord and on YouTube, is Charles Sanders' Santiago Purse, who is an American philosopher and pragmatist. He was also a logician. He was working in the 1800s, died in 1914, and he has often been accredited as kind of like revitalizing this ancient Greek tradition of thinking about signs, or the semion. And so this is the fellow that I study in my work in philosophy. Despite how goofy I am, I do have a doctorate in philosophy, and I study particularly Charles Sanders Peirce, his theory of signs, its application to logic and reasoning in particular. And then also the kind of relationship between Peirce's ideas, which were neglected, and the rise of early analytic philosophy. So people like Bertrand Russell, Ludwig Wittgenstein, Frege, others like that. So that's a bit about what I do. I'm currently doing a postdoc in philosophy at the University of Toronto, where I am working with with some folks on Charles Sanders Peirce and this other little known philosopher, Margaret MacDonald, who read a lot about Peirce in the early 1930s and wrote a dissertation about him in London. So in any case, that is what the Semiotician is. I like the name Semiotician. I think it sounds cool. Semiotics is awesome. If you're looking for a Peirce recommendation, the best place to start is the fixation of belief. Though you won't see Peirce talking much about signs there at all, but rather with the methods that we tend to uphold when we fix our beliefs about a certain dispute or whatever. In any case, though, I won't bore you with any more philosophy. This is just to give you some background to say, okay, I'm the Semiotician. You might not have known what that strange word means. That gives you some sense about what a Semiotician is, someone who studies signs, and Charles Sanders Peirce is one of the greatest Semioticians to have ever lived. And so I pay homage to Peirce and to semiotics in my profile pictures. Moving on, though, to the good stuff. Magic the Gathering. When did I start playing Magic the Gathering? I believe, and memory gets a little hazy, but I believe I began playing Magic the Gathering in 2007, sometime between Future Sight and the release of 10th edition. I know that 10th edition wasn't out yet, but I know that it was very close to coming out when I started playing. And that's because one of the first tournaments I ever went to was a sealed tournament with respect to 10th edition, with 10th edition coming out. So I started playing Magic when I was around 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old, way back in 2007. Future Sight had just come out. 10th edition was around the corner. Planeswalkers weren't even in the game yet at that point. And yeah, obviously you could have started playing Magic in the 90s and you would have really had like the real heyday, the real experience of playing the game. But I look back at this time of Magic in a very, very fond way as well. And I kind of thought that I was like new to the game. Well, I obviously was new to the game back then, but when I'm talking to more and more people that I've been like meeting, at tournaments and whatnot, it's like, wow, I think I've actually been playing Magic longer than a lot of people who are playing the game. And so I don't know, that's kind of cool. It's cool to think that like, oh, wow, like way back in Future Sight or 10th edition, it feels awesome to say that. Basically, that was really cool. The way that I got into it, my cousins and I were kind of getting into Warhammer, and we would be like painting our miniatures and going to the local hobby store. I have to give a shout out to J&J's in Waterloo, Ontario. That place was awesome. They sold Warhammer, but the Warhammer was like located, so you'd have to like walk by these display cases filled with Magic cards in order to get to the Warhammer section of the store. And so every time I'd be there like buying paints or getting more glue or whatever it might be, I would see these like nerds, these like college nerds like slouching over these display cases looking at like Magic cards. Like I remember seeing like original Mana Drains in this display case for like $11 or something like this, and it just being like, oh, like what is this game that these folks are playing? It's Magic the Gathering. Oh, cool. These cards look great. Like I had some Pokemon cards and some Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but I never really I just looked at the pictures and thought that they were cool. I watched like the TV shows, right? I never really got directly into playing like the mechanics of those games, but Magic was like the first card game that I like really seriously learned how to play. And yeah, my dad basically bought me a bunch of Magic cards because I just kind of, I don't know, I just as a kid wasn't really into doing like team sports. So like I was always encouraged to play like soccer or hockey or these things, right? And my brother was super into those sports, but I just was like never really interested in like putting myself out there in that kind of way. I was more into like Warhammer and doing nerd like things. And so my dad saw that I was like quite interested in this game Magic the Gathering, and he would actually like buy me Magic cards to like help build decks, which was like really, really awesome because he felt bad that he was like spending so much money on my brother playing sports and whatnot. So like, I don't know, there's not many dads that are that cool, but I have to really give a shout out to my dad in that respect for not only like supporting my interest in the game, but also even like taking me to weekly standard FNMs, like Friday Night Magic. Man, he would like take me, we would go get burgers at Harvey's, and then we would go to the local game store in Kitchener, Ontario, and he would just sit there while I played 4 rounds of Magic. And it was just like awesome. And then eventually he like got to know some of the people that I was playing with, and then felt like comfortable leaving me at the game store alone. But it was like quite awesome. I was by far the youngest person there playing. I was playing mostly against college students from the University of Waterloo and whatnot. And it was just like, I don't know, these are some of the fondest memories of my childhood. I loved playing this game. I really enjoyed the game. And yeah, I really I must say thank you to my father for supporting this endeavor. He's unfortunately no longer with us anymore. And so this is like a very fond memory that I look back on from my childhood. And so this is great. So I got into Magic around Future Sight and 10th edition. I was at that time playing standard, and then I really enjoyed sealed decks. So I would go to like sealed tournaments on the weekends. But what was my first deck, as far as I can remember, the first deck that I ever got was the Fun with Fungus Precon, dude. The Fun with Fungus Precon. It was like this. So this was like back when like precons weren't commander decks. They were like standard decks, or like, I guess like in a way like block constructed decks in some respect. They were like pretty mediocre. They would come with a couple of rares and a game plan, and this one was built around Thalids and Saproling. So you'd have these like green creatures. You would have these green creatures, right, that would like accumulate these like spore tokens. I forget what they were called. And you would get like 3 tokens. You could remove 3 of the counters from the card, and then you would get a 1/1 Saproling token, and then you would play like cards that like pump creatures equal to the number of creatures you control. So it was this like really slow, cool kind of deck. And I remember like showing up to FNM, my first ever like FNM, didn't even have the deck sleeved. I like pulled it out of my like the cardboard box that it came with that's pictured here. And I just remember sitting down against my first round opponent, and he was one of the better players. I didn't know it at the time, but he was like one of the, probably like the kind of end boss of that local tournament. There were a few other guys there who, like Dan McDonald was there, who plays on the Pro Tour. And I remember like battling against him as well when I was younger. But I shit you not, my first experience, right? I sit down, I've got my like unsleeved Fun with Fungus Time Spiral pre-constructed deck, and my opponent just goes turn 2 Tarmogoyf. And I just remember like getting absolutely hosed by this Tarmogoyf and just thinking like, oh my god, my 1/1 Saprolings are nothing compared to this. I didn't have many removal spells in my deck, and I just remember like at the end of the night, after like, I think I might have won 1 round. I think I beat Dragonstorm or something. The deck just like like whiffed out. And I remember like going up to my dad after being like, Dad, we need to get these these Tarmogoyf cards. I'm like, this card seems a lot better than anything else that I that I have in my deck. And so yeah, Grayson just like ran over me with like multiple Tarmogoyfs and like Dark Confidants, maybe like Silhana Ledgewalkers. It was like it was quite something. The green black rock deck. And so I was just like severely outclassed with my goofy little precon, but it was like enough, like getting my face jammed in by a Tarmogoyf was enough to get me like super excited about this game, because it was playing against like seeing that how powerful the card was and for how little mana was spent to play it, and how it kind of like excels throughout the later game as like more things go to the graveyards and whatnot. I just thought it was such a sick Magic card, and I was really like hooked after that moment. It just takes dying to a fucking 2 mana 4/5 to really like get your juices flowing about Magic the Gathering, you know? And so that was like, yeah, my first experience in an actual tournament, just getting absolutely run over by a Tarmogoyf. It was awesome. But then like I kind of got obsessed with this green black color combination. And so we would order some cards or go back to J&J's and like look for some more cards. 10th edition was coming out, and with it was a reprint of Troll Aesthetic, Birds of Paradise, and Loxodon Warhammer. And I remember this, like, I don't remember the exact like version of the deck, but I was playing this like really, really cool green black rock deck with Birds of Paradises. I had Troll Ascetic in it. So this is like the original True Name Nemesis, right? It's 1 and 2 green for a 3/2. Has Regenerate for 2, and then it can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponent controls, right? So back then, But this card, right? It had hexproof before hexproof was a thing, right? So most of the cards were they would have shroud, which means that I couldn't even equip my Loxodon Warhammer to a card with shroud. But Troll Ascetic, my dudes, Troll Ascetic couldn't be the target of spells or abilities your opponent controls, and so you could suit up your Troll Ascetic with the Loxodon Warhammer and have a 6/2 lifelink trample with hexproof and regenerate, and so you would just like ram your your 6/3 6/2 into your opponent. They would block, you would like regenerate the troll and then trample over them, gain a bunch of life, and it was just like absolutely insane. I loved equipping a Loxodon Warhammer to a Troll Ascetic. And I like slowly accumulated Tarmogoyfs. I remember the first Tarmogoyf we ever got our hands on was my brother. He ended up getting like a little into magic, and there was one day where we went to J&J's. I remember this vividly. My mom bought us each a pack of Future Sight, and I was sitting in the front seat, and I like opened. I don't know what I opened. It was nothing notable. And my brother's in the back seat. He's like, "Oh, I got this Tarmogoyf card you keep talking about," and I just remember like screaming like a little girl in the car, and my mom was like, calm down, Scott, this is ridiculous. So like there was a while where like in this deck I just had one Tarmogoyf, but then we eventually tracked down additional copies of Tarmogoyf. I think they were about 15 or 20 to $30 a piece when I was playing back then. It was like before modern, right? So they didn't skyrocket in price yet, but they were still like more expensive than most of the other cards. And then you would think about paying $30 for a piece of cardboard. Like, I don't know, don't tell my mom I bought Underground Seas, right? Recently. But yeah, so I built this sweet deck. When 10th edition came out, it was more competitive. I started doing like a little bit better at my weekly FNM standard tournaments. And then in Lorwyn, my boy Doran the Siege Tower was released. And I mean, I really liked Lord of the Rings as a kid. I loved the Ents. I think like tree folk are like really cool fantasy creatures. And when I saw the tribe of tree folk in Lorwyn, I got super excited, especially when seeing Doran the Siege Tower, which fit very naturally into the kind of rock deck that I was already building. Especially because Tarmogoyf is an X1, right? And so Tarmogoyf with a Doran out. Anyways, I ended up dropping the Troll Ascetic, the Loxodon Warhammer, playing like Birds of Paradise, Tarmogoyf's Dorans. I had like Bitter Blossom in the deck. And I was kind of playing the rock, and there was a card like Treefolk Harbinger, I think it was, a 1-mana 0/3 Treefolk. When it came into play, you could search for a Treefolk or a forest, I believe, and put it on top of your deck. And there was Murmuring Bosk, the Treefolk tribal land, which was Abzan colors, but it was a forest, and so you could like search for your like multicolored land off of your Treefolk Harbinger. If you had the Doran, if you had the land to cast the Doran, you would get the Doran off the Treefolk Harbinger, and then it would turn the Doran would turn your 0/3 into a 3/3 attacker, and you would start crunching into the red zone. And so I played Doran for a really, really long time, and I like loved this deck so much. It just like really excited me. I think he looks awesome, and I think after talking about this right now, I might actually make a budget Treefolk commander deck that just uses like, I don't know, man, Doran the Siege Tower is your commander. You play like, what is it? I need like an alpha like Iron Root Treefolk in the deck or something. I think that could be fun. In any case, I had a lot of fun playing like rock decks in standard. But then with Lorwyn, I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was like a really, really sweet deck that it was like one of the coolest things I'd ever heard of. It was called Quick and Toast. I remember watching Pro Tour coverage. I can't remember which Pro Tour it was. It must have been in 2007 or 2008. And there was Wafo Tapa was playing this like 5-color control deck called Quick and Toast. And it's visualized up here on the top of the screen. So there was like Wall of Roots. It played Cryptic Command and Cloud Thresher in the same deck. And you have to realize, right, that like at this time, Blue-Black Fairies was the dominant deck in Blue-Black Fairies was the dominant deck in Standard. And that deck was like egregiously powerful. It was like really good tempo with like Bitter Blossom, Spellstutter Sprite, Scion of Uza, Mistbind Click to tap down your lands in your opponent's upkeep. It was a really, really powerful deck. But Wafo Tapa utilized the combo of it was Reflecting Pool with the Vivid lands from Lorwyn. So they're these lands that entered tapped, and they would tap for like blue, but they would have 2 charge counters on them, and then you could remove a charge counter. so that you could add a mana of any color. So if you had a vivid land plus a reflecting pool, your reflecting pool, it was just a 5-color land that dealt no damage to you. So like the combo was like Vivid Creek plus Bitter Blossom, or sorry, Vivid Creek plus Reflecting Pool, and that would let you play your 4 green pipped Cloud Thresher and your 3 green pipped Cryptic Command in the same deck, while also playing like Pyroclasms, Unas, Careful Consideration, Muldrifter, Fire Spout, and the whole deck's like, it's cut off in this image, so I only have part of it here, but it was like so much fun to play. And I remember seeing this deck and just thinking like, this is the coolest. Like, I didn't think at the time, right, that you could have a 5-color deck. And come to think of it, right, like, it must have been when I saw Mark Tobias's 4-color Doomsday control deck from Eternal Weekend. Like, I'm imagining that some of the same brain receptors, the reason I love Quick and Toast so much, started firing when I saw that 4-color Doomsday deck. Right, you've got your 3-color, 3-black Pip spell in the same deck, with your like Veil of Summers and your Swords to Plowshares and your Teferis and whatnot. I mean, so I got really into playing this deck, and I remember like, we just built the deck Quick and Toast, my dad and I started playing it, and this is when I started actually doing well. Like, I think I was consistently like 3-1ing, sometimes even 4-0ing, with Quick and Toast and 5-color control at my standard FNMs. And then when Shards of Alara came out, Cruel Ultimatum was introduced into the into the deck, and so it became like this. It became a deck called Cruel Control, which when I look back on my early days of playing Magic, like Cruel Control is the deck I always remember. I had so much fun playing it. Plume Veils, Muldrifters, Esper Charms. I think I played a version with like 4 Bant Charms in it too. There was like, yeah, Hollowed Burial was like the Wrath of God effect, Volcanic Fallout for little creatures. Then Cruel Ultimatum was your win condition. You would just start like chaining Cruel Ultimatum, slam like a Broodmate Dragon. I don't know, dude. This deck was so sick. And I have this like explicit memory. The night that Shards of Alara, I think, that came out and Cruel Ultimatum was added. It was either Shards of Alara or whatever came after that. Whenever this and then the Charms were out, I can't remember if that was the same set or not. But DMAC was like on his way to go play in like a Pro Tour or a Grand Prix in Montreal, and he just like gave me his. He's like, "Do you want to 4-0 tonight?" And I was like, "Yes." He's like, "What are you playing?" I'm like, Cruel Control," and he's like, "Play my Cruel Control," and it was like different from my deck. Because he was playing like 8 Charms. He's like, "You'll 4-0 if you play this." And I remember playing the deck and going 4-0. And then at the end of the night, when I had to like return the deck to one of his friends who stayed behind, I like quickly copied down the list, went to J&J's, built the list. Then the next week, I like started out 3-0, and DMAC was back with the deck 3-0, and we got paired in the last round. And then I remember beating him in the last round. And I don't know, that was I was like super proud of that night, because I took the deck, I 4-0'd, and then I beat the deck's creator in the last round of the FNM, which was super awesome. I just remember having like a really good time playing these decks in particular in Standard. But I realize that you're all Legacy players, and I'll probably stop talking about this. But if any of you were playing these decks back then, like, let me know in the comments, because man, this is like, I have very fond memories playing this Standard format. I think Lorwyn was awesome, and we're actually returning to Lorwyn this next year. Man, that's just awesome. Good riddance to this like universes beyond nonsense, right? Let's go back to Lorwyn. Let's go back to Alara. Let's go back to like Kamigawa. I don't know, man. Let's just like celebrate Magic because it's sick. In any case, I did play in 2 Legacy tournaments during this time playing Standard as a kid. So there was like a couple of like older, more enfranchised players that had a bunch of old cards, and they started. This one guy he ran 2 Legacy tournaments in Kitchener, I remember, at the Phoenix, which is where I would primarily play. And I think the first one, I'm not 100% sure about this, but something in my brain tells me that the prize of the first one that I played in was a Mox Emerald. Like, first place gets a Mox Emerald. Can you imagine? That's so sick. They don't make them like they used to. I remember hearing about this format Legacy, and I'd heard a little bit about Extended, and I thought Extended was really cool. But Legacy just seemed like a whole other Like it was really, really, really cool to me. I was super into Legacy. And I didn't have any Legacy cards. Like my it's like I didn't have Bayous, I didn't have duels. My collection was very like I had a lot of stuff because my dad was awesome from the standard form sets of the time since I started playing. I didn't have many older cards, but I remember knowing that this was coming up and like one of the guys being like, "Oh, there's a couple like good rock cards that you could get like Smother, Pernicious Deed that like aren't too expensive." So I like picked up these cards and built like this kind of budget green black rock deck that was reminiscent of this. I don't even remember if I played Doran or not. I think it was like Tarmogoyfs, Thought Seizes, Pernicious Deeds, Smother, and a bunch of cards like that. I think I went like 2-3 in the tournament or something. Obviously didn't go to top 8. I think I remember the person winning the tournament was on Rug Natural Order for like Progenitus. And I just remember like watching that guy play the deck and just being like, oh, okay, like this is like the coolest format I've ever seen. You can natural order for like a 10/10 protection from everything on like turn 3. Like this and like back it up with these like free counter spells. I was like free counter spells, right? I've been used to playing cryptic commands, playing 4 mana or like rune snag, right, to counter my opponent's spell for 2 mana. The idea of like being able to stop something that your opponent was doing without paying any mana to do so was like so cool to me. And I just started becoming like obsessed with these older formats because I just really liked the kind of power level and the amount of thinking involved in these games, right, where there's more like like, oh, your opponent's tapped out doesn't mean that they don't have anything, that kind of thinking, right? I mean, I got really into it. I did not do well in the first tournament, but then maybe like I don't know if it was like 6 months or like a year later, there was another Legacy tournament, and by now I believe that by now Zendikar had come out. So I don't remember when that was. It's like 2011, maybe 2010. I can't remember when Zendikar came out. I was probably around like I don't know how old I was, like 12 or 13 or something like this. And this time I was like a bit more friendly with some of the more enfranchised players, and my one the one guy that I was playing with was like, "Look, I'm playing the Rock again at this Legacy tournament because green black was his like favorite color combination." But he's like, "But I've got all the duels. Um I've got some like Force of Wills, right? I've got some Stifles. You can borrow those cards if you would like to like select a deck to play." And I remember like going onto the internet and like looking at the different decks that there were, and being Canadian, I came across a deck that was called Canadian Threshold. And this is like Canadian Threshold before Delver of Secrets was a Magic the Gathering card. Delver of Secrets did not exist yet. And I came across a deck. I don't know if this is the exact list that I play. This is like a Dave Kaplan list from like 2010 or 2011. This is like pretty close to what I sleeved up at my second ever Legacy tournament. And this deck, I mean, this is like really the moment where like Magic became one of my favorite things to be doing. Like, I thought that this was the coolest deck ever. Not only did it have 4 copies of Tarmogoyf in it, which remained one of my favorite cards ever since I got crushed in my first ever competitive game. It played Nimble Mongoose, which I thought was sweet. You know that I really enjoyed the Shroud ability because of my experience with Troll Aesthetic. But then it also had all these powerful blue cards like Ponder, Brainstorm, Daze, Force of Will, and particularly Stifle. I remember looking at the art on Stifle as a kid and just thinking that it was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I remembered when I played my last Legacy tournament getting blown out by Wasteland, right? So it's like, oh, there's so many good cards we need access to. These Wastelands are really, really important. They seem really good to the strategy. And so I built this Canadian Threshold deck, Rug Delver, before Delver was a Magic card. Nimble Mongooses, Tarmogoyfs. I think I played like one Vendilion click in my deck as well. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, I mean, if you look at this, Spell Snares, because Tarmogoyf was so good, and then there was also like counterbalance in the format at the time, so Spell Snare would hit that. Spell Snare your like opponent's Hymn to Turok. Spell Snare was a very, very powerful card back in 2011, right? And I think I actually finished this tournament. Like, I was really young. I was by far the youngest person there, playing with all these old cards, playing against all these older people who knew better what they were doing. But I think I ended up like 3-2 at this tournament. and it was some of the most fun that I've ever had playing Magic, and I like never really forgot that. And so this was my like real experience. This was the first time. I was really young. My first time I ever played Legacy, and I had so much fun playing this deck. And you'll see that as we proceed, that this deck, even today, right? I've been playing a lot of like Cutter recently. This deck in particular is very near and dear to my heart, even more so than Doomsday in some respects. Um, I didn't continually keep playing Magic though. I actually stopped playing Magic and sold almost every single Magic card I had in 2011 before Modern was a format. I I still think that that was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life. I really enjoyed playing the game, um, but when I went to high school, a lot of my friends were getting into music, and I had played guitar um, as a kid, but uh, but they wanted to make a band, and so I decided that I could sell my my Magic collection for like $2,000 and buy a Gibson Les Paul studio for like $1,200 and then like a half decent guitar amp. And so I did that. I sold my entire collection and bought this stupid guitar and then started playing music. And now, like, I don't know, Modern became a format, like all the Stoneforge Mystics, all the standard staples that I had saved up and that kind of like weren't worth enough, just like skyrocketed in price. And my collection like probably like tripled in value overnight, um, because Modern became a format. And then yeah, then the Gibson Les Paul didn't seem so cool. But you know, in any case, I stopped playing Magic in paper, but I still would play like occasionally with some of my friends from high school. Like whenever a new set would come out, we would go down to J&J's. We'd each pick up 6 booster packs and we'd build a sealed deck, and like mess around in our lunch breaks or like skip some classes to play. It was awesome. At some point, like along high school, I also like, you know, playing these sealed decks, started missing out on Magic and like kind of regretting my decision of selling the cards. And I had at that point heard of Magic Online. Like I would still be like watching like legacy coverage on Star City Games every week, stuff like that. And I started getting interested in cube drafts on Magic Online. So you'd see like LSV and like Owen Turtenwald on Channel Fireball and stuff, like doing these cube drafts on around the holidays. And I was like, oh, I want to participate in those. And that is how the Scuba 96 was born on Magic Online. I made my Magic Online account primarily just to play Cube, like vintage Cube. But then I also did end up, I think I bought, because I'd gotten a job in high school and I used some of my like paychecks to buy those like MasterCard prepaid visas, and then I would use those to to like convert them into tickets on Magic Online. And I like bought a dredge deck because it was relatively inexpensive at the time. And I remember like as a kid, like seeing Golgari Grave Troll like run amok in extended and hearing people talk about dredge as being like this super busted thing. So I was like, oh, legacy dredge, like that seems awesome. Let's build that deck. And so I like built it, but then I kind of like I didn't really understand how it worked back then, and I kind of got sick of it really quickly. Like it wasn't playing dredge wasn't like playing Magic when I was younger, right? Like it wasn't like this and I wanted to be playing this, but it was just kind of out of my price range even on Magic Online to acquire the cards to build that deck, and by then certainly could not afford to build decks like that in paper. And so I just spent my time, you know, cubing and mostly just keeping up to date on Legacy by watching the Star City Games coverage every weekend. And I mean, like almost every weekend, like I would follow along, always be interested, like watching these people play lands and Stoneforge Mystics and standstills on coverage. And I was like, this is just the coolest format ever. I love Legacy so much, like for the love of Legacy, right? This format is the best format, in my opinion, and it will probably remain the best format despite what you may think about it today. I still think Legacy is fucking awesome. And so yeah, that like carried on for a little while. Then in 2017, I was doing my undergrad in philosophy. And I decided that I wanted to start playing Magic again, but I knew, right, that the only Magic I wanted to play was Legacy. Modern had like changed a lot from when I was initially watching like Modern coverage with like Splinter Twins and stuff. But Legacy always like it was like familiar to me, right? Like things had changed but they hadn't changed that much, and you could still look at Canadian Threshold like doing well in 2017, and you would look at these like really powerful cards that had been printed in the time that I was away, like Deathrite Shaman, and just realizing like how good Deathrite Shaman was in like Grixis Delver, and then seeing these check pile lists with Sultai, like with Leovold, and like Kulagon's command in it that were like reminiscent of like the 5-color like Quicken Toast and Cruel Control decks that I was super into as a kid. And so in undergrad, I ended up selling one of my guitars and then buying a bunch of tickets on Magic Online, and I put together Stoneblade. I remember this vividly. I put together Stoneblade. I like played one league with it. I think I went 3-2 or 4-1. I was like, this is so sick. And I was like, I want Grixis Delver. And then I like got the cards to make Grixis Delver in addition to Stoneblade. And then from there, Check Pile slowly worked its way into the mix as well. And I just began playing leagues for fun. And so, yeah, like I kind of started up. I never really experienced the heyday of Miracles in Legacy. Like I watched a lot of the coverage on SCG, but I really started playing like right after Top was banned. Because I remember when I was like looking into some of the deck lists, of what I would like to play, some of the cards weren't like legal anymore. Like it was when like MTG Goldfish was just like changing over from like a previous format to a new one, so some older decks were like still on there. In any case, so I experienced the kind of heyday of Grixis Delver. To this day, one of the most powerful decks I've ever played. Deathrite Shaman is one of the sickest drugs. You love a Deathrite Shaman. I love that card so much, and I loved Leovold too and Check Pile. And I just remember grinding a bunch of leagues, lots of like 3-2s and 4-1s, hardly ever 5-0ing. But just like having a really, really good time playing with these great Magic cards that I remembered as a kid. And then after Deathrite Shaman and Probe were banned in 2018, I actually went back to Canadian Threshold for a while and Sultai Midrange, and I also became interested in Standstill as an archetype, and really since 2017 I haven't really stopped playing Magic since 2017. I took a brief hiatus during the Ragavan format. I didn't actually play when Ragavan was legal. I think there was that MH2. Yeah, I don't know, at the time it was like a lot of the MH2 cards were really expensive on Magic Online, and I just didn't want to drop like $300 on Magic Online to buy like 4 Ragavans to keep playing my Delver deck or whatever it was, and like Urza Sagas were really expensive. So I just was like, yeah, a lot of my decks that I could keep up to date by spending minimal amounts of money each time a set was released became like completely irrelevant due to the power level of cards from these Modern Horizons sets. And this was like, I was into this like largely all before like these rental services were a thing, right? So it's not that you could just spend a couple $50 a month or something to rent a deck. You kind of had to buy the cards, but they were cheaper to buy digital cards than they were to buy paper cards. And so this was a way that I could play Legacy, and I played Legacy Online exclusively for a whole time. I don't consider myself in any way like a diehard Legacy grinder or anything like that. So this video is called the love for the love of Legacy, and I play Legacy because I love playing Legacy, and I love seeing these old powerful Magic cards. I enjoy the history of the game. I enjoy watching how these archetypes develop, and I like how Legacy is a slow moving format. Even despite what you may think today, right? The core of all of these decks have endured, right? Their legacies have endured for a very, very long time. And like the best color combinations and the best decks wax and wane, but there's always an oppressor. There's always some kind of deck that someone isn't happy with. But we just persist and we endure, right? And the metagame develops, and every now and again cards will fall to the wayside. But there was a time when Tundra reigned, right? Like I remember watching on Star City Games when I was a kid being like, blue-white, seems like blue-white's what you want to be doing. This Miracles, this counterbalance card with Sensei's Divining Top. This seems like a pretty powerful combo. Why would anyone want to do anything else, right? And then there was the time when Volcanic Island was super powerful, when Canadian Threshold and Delver was like the best possible thing you could be doing, and that was kind of reinforced through the expressive iteration era. And now today Underground Sea is the best thing that you can be doing in Legacy, right? So the like each duel kind of like has had its time in the sun, and Legacy is the format you go to do absolutely busted things. And I love, right, that the barrier to entry is a turn to Atraxa, because it puts so much pressure onto like the kinds of constraints you make in deck building, the kinds of decisions you make in games, like in turns 1 to 2 of a game, or even in your mulligan decisions. Like, I love that about this format in particular. I love taking a whole bunch of decisions and condensing them down into like 1 to 4 turns. And I love the way that the games play out when both players do everything they can in those first 3 turns to stop the other from winning, and then each has nothing, and then you just peter out into this like weird draw go game state where cantrips and other cards dig you into the things that you need at precisely the right moment to pull ahead. I play Legacy to have fun. I still have fun playing Legacy, even though the format is, according to some, not the best. I think it's still great, and I think that more people need to appreciate, the like just how awesome Legacy is, for the love of Legacy, right? That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it come what may. Yes, very well. Okay, let's talk about a couple of notable finishes that I've had throughout my Magic career. The first one came in the pandemic, right? So we all kind of grinded into a standstill, and I went into a deep kind of standstill phase during the pandemic. And this, I mean, I can't take credit for the list that you see on the screen here. This list was designed by H.C. Fox. Um, and this was a Dreadstill deck that Fox had been working on for a very, very long time. And Fox and I played in this showcase challenge together on Discord. And we somehow finished sixth with this like atrocity you see before you, but I still think this is one of the coolest decks that I've ever played. So let's just like give a rundown of this list, because you look at it and you're just like, what the fuck is going on here, right? And this is all out of Fox. I take no credit for this list. This is Fox's list, but it is one of the cooler Legacy decks I'd ever seen. And like I've been enamored by these janky things. Like, part of the reason why I spend so much time talking about Quick and Toast and Cruel Control is so that you can like appreciate why I thought that this was cool. So it was like Phyrexian Dreadnought, obviously a baller Magic card. I loved Phyrexian Dreadnought, but particularly like the kind of Stifle Knot decks you see today weren't like the Stifle Knot decks that I was interested in back in like 2020 and 2019. Those decks were like Dreadstill decks. So you would play like Phyrexian Dreadnought, and then you would jam a Standstill and be like, what you gonna do about it, opponent? You gotta answer my 12/12. I'll Ancestral Recall. Like, the choice is yours. But this deck was like somewhere between a hard blue-white control deck that also had like a super aggressive angle with Phyrexian Dreadnought. I remember Fox and I winning one of the matches in this tournament with like 4 seconds left in our clock. We like started game 3 with like 10 seconds left, and we just had or maybe it was like 15 seconds left, and we had a turn to Stifled Dreadnought attack you twice. I remember attacking with like the second on the chess clock, going down from like 3 to 2 to 1 as the Dreadnought was swinging in for lethal. But we have here the only creatures in the deck being 3 Phyrexian Dreadnoughts and 1 Jace Vryn's Prodigy. We've got 4 copies of Brainstorm. There's no Ponders in this deck, so that's how you make room for all the Nutto cards. There's 1 Spell Snare, 1 Enlightened Tutor. So the Enlightened Tutor was like Standstill number 3, Arkham's Astrolabe number 2. You could Infernal Tutor for Shark Typhoon, which was pretty awesome as well. You could also Infernal Tutor for Phyrexian Dreadnought, and you could Infernal Tutor for Scroll of Fate and Search for Azcanta. And then in the sideboard, you would also be able to like Infernal Tutor for like Porphyry Nodes to kill True Name Nemesis. You could like pick up your Aethersworn Canonist, your Powder Keg, your Torpor Orb, your Crucible of Worlds, your Spark Hunter Mastercore, another Scroll of Fate. The sideboard's like also so weird. The sideboard's also so weird because we also have Karn the Great Creator. And so like Karn could get any of these toolbox cards that you were looking for. But the reason the deck like worked so well, in my opinion, was that what you would try to do is set up, so you would try to resolve like a Teferi Time Raveler and have like a Scroll of Fate out, And then in your opponent's end step, you would manifest a Phyrexian Dreadnought from your hand face down, and that'd be in your opponent's end step. And if you have a Teferi, then it means that they just like they cannot interact with your Teferi with your Dreadnought at all. They just can't cast spells because you have a Teferi out. You pass a turn, you flip your manifested Dreadnought over and 12 your opponent, and usually you would set this up as like a one-shot combo. After having like let your opponent like whittle their own life total down with their fetch lands and getting in a couple of strikes with one of your 3 Mishra's Factories. And so, yeah, like this is one of the cooler decks that I've ever played. You've got Savine's Reclamation to like return, Scroll of Fates, or like there was one time where you have like 2 Dreadnoughts in your graveyard. You like use Karn to tutor for Torpor Orb, jam the Torpor Orb, and then like Savine's Wreck 2 Dreadnoughts from your graveyard. You can do crazy things with this deck, and Fox was like kind of really tuned into how to play this deck against the metagame, and we somehow just like I think we were undefeated for almost the entire tournament. We were like 7-1 after Swiss, and then we lost in the quarters to Delver. I think we just kind of the draws finally fizzled out on us. But I remember having a great time playing this list, and we were both just laughing that such an atrocity like this could make it into the finals, into the top 8 of a showcase challenge. We just like played very well that day. Spark Hunter Masticore was in the deck because Oko was like a big problem at the time as well. But yeah, we were having a lot of fun. People had no idea what we were doing. They would just be playing against blue-white control, and suddenly they're dead to a Dreadnought. Search for Azcanta's sick card you don't get to play anymore. Scroll of Fate was awesome. Karn, awesome. Shark Typhoon, awesome. Arkham's Astrolabe, sick little one of that let you like turn your Mishra's Factories into like the second white pip you need. It would also let you like fetch planes on turn 1, like Enlighten Tutor for Arkham's Astrolabe, and then play the Astrolabe off your snow-covered plains, which then turns your snow-covered plains into an unwastelandable tundra. And then you would draw a card too, so kind of like going down a card off the Enlighten Tutor didn't matter as much. There was just like lots of neat things going on with this deck, and people just had no idea how to play against it, and it was awesome. I'll stop talking about it now, but this was like the first kind of notable tournament finish that I had. And we got to the 2020 Reanimate icon on Magic Online, that avatar, as a result of playing this deck, which is hilarious to me. My second notable tournament finish was in 2023. I finished 4th place in the Showcase Challenge. I think it was the weekend after Expressive Iteration was banned, so I spent a really, really long time just grinding leagues with Blue-Red Delver with Expressive Iteration. That deck, by the way, was one of the most powerful decks I've ever played in my entire life. Few things felt that consistent to me. It really reminded me of playing like Jeskai Xerox and Vintage, which I would play every now and again while I was bored. I also enjoyed playing Vintage on Magic Online, and there were those Xerox decks where like everything was just a copy of everything else, and that's kind of the experience you got playing Blue-Red Delver with Expressive Iterations in your deck. But this particular weekend, Expressive Iteration was banned, and I just kind of whipped this deck together myself. I was like, okay, Expressive Iteration's banned. I'm going to play 1 Life from the Loam and 1 Sylvan Library. That's my green cards. And I'm going to have 2 more Minsc and Boos in the sideboard to try to beat control decks, because that was always like a hard matchup for Delver. And I remember starting out 7-0 in the tournament with this list that you see here. I think a lot of people just thought Delver was dead, and I was like, no, we're just going to keep playing Delver. And so we did. There's a random true name Nemesis down here. I was playing that. It's a little bit clunky. I don't know why I was playing 2 baubles only. I think at the time I didn't fully appreciate just how powerful that card is. Certainly now, Delver's always playing 4 baubles, and like it's never really being sideboarded out. But yeah, this deck was really, really cool. And I remember playing against a Delver player in the Swiss who it was this deck, but they were playing 4 Tarmogoyfs. And then they I beat them in the Swiss, and then they beat me in the top four, and then they ended up winning the tournament, and then everybody started playing their Delver deck and not mine with the four Tarmogoyfs in it, and I even started playing it too. Tarmogoyf was sweet, but I remember like the mirror match in that tournament, like always coming down to either like my true name Nemesis to just stonewall the Tarmogoyfs, or the submerge being like extraordinarily helpful as a sideboard technology. It was there for Merit Lage primarily, but it also was helping shore up the Tarmogoyf problem in the Delver mirror. And so I fell in the top four, but this was like a tournament where like I just felt like I was really on my game that day. I was playing very, very well. I started out 7-0, and then I think I got paired against two control decks in the last two rounds and lost to both of those, fell to 7-2, snuck into top 8 and 8th place because I started out 7-0. And then I beat one of the control players in the quarterfinals, but then lost the Delver mirror um, in the top four. So that was my other like sixth tournament finish on Magic Online, and that is how I have is it the Brazen Borrower icon? I don't even know which one it is. The 2023 Legacy Prestige avatar. We got playing this deck, and that's still the avatar that I use to this day. Though maybe I'll go back to the Reanimate one. The Reanimator one's pretty awesome too. It's got a cooler art. But yeah, so that was my fourth place run with Expressive Iterationless Rug Delver. Minsc and Boo's sick card. Wish you could still play that card, but it's just, I don't know, it's just not quite good enough anymore, I don't think. And so yeah, I got really into Legacy. I was always playing online, hanging around, and then I moved to Hamilton for my PhD in philosophy. The pandemic hit, everything was kind of in disarray. I started getting interested in potentially picking up these like paper cards, especially because I had done like so well in these two tournaments and had been playing like quite consistently in this time zone. That time frame, sorry. I started looking into paper cards. I like went to a game store. I went to the wrong game store, clearly. I asked, I'm like, oh, does anyone play, like, it was like when things were starting to open up again after the pandemic. I'm like, does anyone play Legacy here? And they're like, nah, no one plays Legacy. And unbeknownst to me, there was just this budding community called Legacy of the North at the time, where they're actually like, and now, right, like in Ontario is probably one of the best places in the world to be playing Legacy. I don't know what all the scenes are like in the States because I don't go there, but like, this is like a really good tournament series. We have 1Ks every weekend. We have 5Ks and 3Ks every now and again. There's like an invitational series that I kind of explained in my last video. There's weekly events at many game stores throughout Ontario in different cities where you can go play Paper Legacy. And as soon as I found out about that, I was like, okay, I can now justify spending you know, on that on some Legacy cards. And so I started out, right, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I really want to be sure that I'm building a deck that I can devote like a lot of time to and spend a lot of time playing. I knew that I wouldn't be able to build any Legacy deck that I wanted to start, at least. I knew that I wanted to play blue, because blue has always been my favorite color. You know that, right? Right back to Quick and Toast. It was always my favorite color. I've always enjoyed Delver, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I can scratch this fascination I've been developing with Doomsday, while also playing Delver by investing in Underground Seas. And so I built blue-black Delver. It was initially Death Shadow, turned into Delver. Did very well with that, but then slowly started building Doomsday because I had the Underground Seas. So I picked up like a Lion's Eye Diamond. I got the other things that I needed. And I just thought that Doomsday was the deck to invest in because it's so hard to play and you can devote many, many years to trying to master it and still like not really be close to mastering it. It's more like I do philosophy, right? I enjoy thinking, and I enjoy solving problems and puzzles. And that is why I was enamored with Doomsday. And so I took this deck on, and I haven't really looked back since until recently. So yeah, I switched to Doomsday last year in preparation for Eternal Weekend, which is I was like super excited to go play, especially since every year for like as long as I can remember, I would watch Eternal Weekend. I would like book that weekend off work and be like, I am watching this coverage every single day. I'm going to follow, the Swiss rounds. I'm going to follow the top 8. I'm going to look up the decks, pay attention to what's going on in the format. It was basically like my Super Bowl, right? I would get like super excited about watching Eternal Weekend, and I was so thrilled to be able to actually go to Eternal Weekend last year and play in this tournament that I've been watching for as long as I can remember. And so I picked up like this Delver deck. I won the first paper 1K I ever played. That image of me holding the hammer at the beginning of the slideshow was my victory photo of that tournament. And then I built Doomsday after. I played in some local 1Ks with Doomsday. I like finished top 4. I finished top 4 of the Legacy of the North Invitational tournament with 4-color Mark Tobias Doomsday. And I just became obsessed with the archetype and knew that that's the archetype that I was going to play at Eternal Weekend. And so I started getting some coaching with Kai, and yeah, I did very well at Eternal Weekend. It was awesome. Here's the picture of me holding my crop rotation. I finished 9-2. This was my paper deck list, right? So we've come a long way from looking at these digital images of decks that I played on Magic Online to seeing this. The Alpha Dark Rituals. I like the way that this deck looks. Now we have the Altered Doomsdays in the place here, and then I received my very special foil Future Sight frame Doomsday from Brandon for my 9-2 24th place finish at Eternal Weekend. And I wrote up my tournament report for this weekend, and a bunch of people in the Doomsday Discord seemed like, pretty excited to read it. And I was like, well, I've been kind of thinking about recording myself playing Magic for a while, and maybe having actually found some success at the biggest Legacy tournament of the year, one of the largest tournaments ever to be held in America for Legacy, specifically finishing 24th and battling against some very, very strong players throughout the day. I thought, why not start making content? And so everything in a way came full circle. Is the crop rotation. I got this picture taken of me holding the crop rotation, and then I found that I was receiving this Doomsday from Brandon, which I value much more highly than this crop rotation as a piece of sentiment. And so I traded this crop rotation to someone at the convention hall for 2 volcanic islands, making me 2 Volks away from playing the deck that we began with way back when, right? 2 Volks away from starting to play Blue-Red Delver or some kind of Canadian Threshold adjacent deck. I was able to acquire the remaining Volks that I needed for that deck, and then I've been playing Cutter and Paper now, having come full circle. As a kid, I never would have thought that I could have owned a deck like Doomsday or like Rug Delver, and the fact that I now have access to both of them, and they're all my own cards, and I can look at them and appreciate them, and that I won some of these cards by just doing well by playing the game is like really, really, really cool to me. And I will never forget that. And this is why this is how the Semiotician was born in some respects, I guess, at least. This is my story playing Magic. I hope that you enjoyed listening to this. What is going to happen for the channel? Well, Eternal Weekend is settled now. I know that I am going. I have my travel plans arranged. I now know that the format will be basically exactly the same as it was last year. And so the channel from now until October is going to be about preparing for Eternal Weekend. I do not know what I want to play. Part of me would love to just run back Doomsday again, just because I loved it last year, but I'm also like having a great time playing Corey Steelcutter in some capacity. And the fact that Reanimate didn't get banned surprises me and leads me, at least, like, it forces me to consider that as an option as well. So I'm going to be releasing a video where I go over like my take on the metagame and the recent changes to Legacy very, very soon. I'm going to foreground 3 or 4 decks that I would like to test and try to understand in preparation for Eternal Weekend. Then I'm going to start recording videos with those decks, and we're going to try to see where we end up. Currently, it's a decision right now, at least, between something like Rug Cutter, or some kind of Corey Seal Cutter tempo deck, Blue Black Reanimator, or some kind of Doomsday deck. And so we'll take those decks seriously in the weeks coming. And I hope that you will all join me in this, because the road to Eternal Weekend starts today, and I will do it for the love of Legacy. Cheers, everybody.